And again, just the slightest touch of the buttocks against the wall is all that you need to give yourself confidence that you can hold here safely. Hi everyone, I'm Greg Capitolo with the Himalayan Institute to share with you a short pose tutorial on Ardha Chandrasana, or half moon pose. Why is it that we wanted to spend a little bit of time looking at Ardha Chandrasana, half moon pose? Well, it's a wonderful standing pose that is actually also a balance pose, as it requires us to come up onto one leg. And it's one of those postures where the benefits, which I'll talk about in a minute, of working in this asana are so tremendous that it warrants us exploring the posture in a little bit of detail, and especially to utilize props or support to experience the benefits of the posture. You know, it's one of those poses that even if we go to our weekly yoga class in town, we're doing a wonderful sequence, and then suddenly the teacher can cue, okay, let's come into a standing half moon pose, Ardha Chandrasana, and if we aren't practiced with it, we kind of get stuck in no man's land in a posture that it's not so great to get stuck there, which I'll show you why in a minute. And so we want to learn how to utilize props. And in this case today, we're going to utilize this nice, lovely wall behind us, which is usually a prop we all have access to. And we'll also utilize a block and a chair so that we can look at work with, I should say, the pose in a safe way, because it's a balance pose, and balance poses aren't so easy. It might take a while for us to train our body and mind to work with this balance pose, and to get both the physical benefits that accrue to us in working with the pose, as well as the alignment and energetic benefits as well, which I'll talk about shortly. With that, let's explore Ardha Chandrasana. So, the way I work with it in utilizing the wall is I know the length of my limbs enough. I've worked with the pose enough to know that I'll also need a block for my bottom arm. So I've got a block in my hand, as you can see. I'm about 4 or 5 inches away from the wall, and my starting position is a typical starting standing position, say for triangle pose, which is actually the pose we'll go through to get into Ardha Chandrasana, or half moon pose. Now, it is the case you can come into the posture in different ways. Some people can come in from a side angle pose where the knee is already bent. I prefer to come through a triangle pose because you can, as you get up and into the pose, you can kind of do it in 2 steps. You gain some confidence and momentum, which I think is really critical when you're working with a somewhat challenging standing pose. So with that, I have my block in my right hand, and let's come into the first side, and I'll talk a little bit about some alignment principles when we're in the posture. So we'll inhale the arms up, and then take an inhale, and we'll kind of come into just a modified triangle just for a moment. And then on the next inhale, I'll just bend the knee and reach the block out and take this trailing leg, in this case the left leg, a little bit forward. And then the next inhale, that's where we place the block on the floor, lift the left leg, and come up. Now, just the slightest touch of the upper, in this case right buttocks, is on the wall. There's not a lot of contact of my body against the wall. And that's all that my, quote, mind-body needs to feel confident, to feel, okay, I'm not going to spill out of this pose or fall. And now you can really extend your spine, work on alignment of the legs and arms. I like to maybe turn the toes up towards the ceiling a little bit on the top leg to work on externally rotating this top thigh and kind of optimize the chance for this top hip to be perfectly aligned with the right or bottom hip. And then you hold here and breathe. And part of the problem is sometimes when we get stuck in Ardha Chandrasana and in a class without props, we're kind of like we end up here, which is not good for anybody. It's certainly not good for the breath, let alone how much stress you might be putting on your low back region. So you come back up, take that top or left buttocks, towards the wall. The right buttocks is just slightly touching the wall. Extend through all four limbs, breathe, and then it's up to you. Stay here, gaze down if that's a little bit better for the head and the neck, or it might be an option that you choose to slightly gaze up. And then to come out, take the top arm to the top hip and very slowly and carefully bend that bottom or right leg as you release the back leg to the floor. And then as you feel you've got your legs under you, come up. And kind of just notice how you feel. And every time I come up from this, I feel fantastic. It's one of the benefits of the pose, you might say. There's just a joy in standing in this posture and kind of seeing the world in a slightly different way. And then when you come up from that posture, from that work, there's just a buoyancy in the spine, in the mind. The legs feel like they got a nice, really activated. And without exception, every time I come up from a hold of Ardha Chandrasana, I just feel a real lightness in my mind, which is super wonderful. So let's do the second side. So same idea with the starting position in your typical Trikonasana or triangle starting position. We'll inhale the arms up. Exhale, move into just a short modified triangle pose. And then again, we're going to come into the pose in kind of two steps or two inhales. The first, you kind of reach out with the block as you take the trailing leg forward towards the left leg. And then with the second inhale, that's where everything happens. Block reaches the floor, right leg lifts, right arm lifts. And again, just the slightest touch of the buttocks against the wall is all that you need to give yourself confidence that you can hold here safely. And then it's up to you. Check your alignment. You might point the toes just a little bit towards the ceiling to, again, externally rotate that top thigh and move that right hip back towards the wall. Extending freely through all four limbs, and actively, I should say, too. And then find your breath. It's not just an asana where we ignore breathing. In fact, the extension and the reach through the four limbs can create wonderful space along the spine for you to breathe fully in a posture that's not so easy to breathe fully when you're in the middle of the room without support that you might need. Again, the position of the head can be a few different ways: towards the floor, gazing straight ahead, or if it's there for you, gazing up towards the top arm. To come out, again, top hand to the top hip, a very careful bend of that bottom knee as you release the top leg, and then straighten the left leg. Then it's good to just, after working in both sides, stand for a moment in a mountain pose, a Tadasana. And check in with how you feel. You might not see it on my face, but internally I'm smiling like you wouldn't believe, because I have that buoyancy and that inner lift to my physiology and to my mind that it never quite fails. The other thing I'd like to add is it can have a very positive therapeutic effect to those of us who might be managing some low back things. I wouldn't necessarily utilize the posture if you're in a very acute episode where the low back is inflamed. However, if you've been working with a skilled yoga teacher, yoga therapist, or physician, and you know what the condition is, what you're managing with the low back, I find this pose tremendously helpful therapeutically in that space where a lot of us get a lot of stickiness and tightness along the sacrum and lumbar spine. So that's another thing to see if that might be how to check in with your body and how you respond in that way. Okay, now, for some of us, the block, for my proportions, works, but for some of us it might not be enough. Well, you can utilize a chair in a very simple way. We have here. So I want to show you how you might utilize a chair in Ardha Chandrasana. Again, putting aside kind of ideals of what we think the pose should look like in the middle of a classroom. We've seen friends or fellow students just have this fantastic half moon pose, no props. Let's relax that kind of tendency, and that's okay. We kind of can all have that striving tendency sometimes. This posture is worth just parking all of that concern and working, even if it means at home in this way. And the good news is, with practice, you can then, because you have the wall, you can gradually come off the wall a little bit and be in a, quote, unsupported or internally supported Ardha Chandrasana. So it's both a means to work with and get the benefits of the posture, as well as a training to work without props potentially. But that doesn't necessarily need to be your end goal. Okay, so what might we do with a chair? So you see I've got the chair just about a foot in front of my leading foot here, and I've got the seat of the chair pointing towards the wall and the back of the chair, of course, towards the camera. So I'm going to come in just as I would without a block this time, because I'm going to use the chair. So inhale the arms up. Exhale, I'm going to come into just a modified triangle. Then I'm going to do the same thing, kind of 2 steps. I inhale, just bend the knee and keep that trailing foot on the floor, but drag it along a little bit. Then the next inhale, I'm going to reach for the chair. Left arm to the seat of the chair, right arm to the back of the chair, and come up. And again, it's just the slightest bit of my, in this case, left buttocks is touching the wall ever so slightly. I've got the support of the chair, and now it's usually best to either take the top hand to the top hip, or as you straighten the bottom arm, extend that top arm up. And so again, you've got the support that you need, but ultimately you want to feel both arms extending, both legs extending, a real literal reaching for the moon out through all 4 limbs. Slightly rotating the top toes up, draw that top buttocks and sit bone back towards the wall, and then head position. Couple options: straight ahead, down towards the chair, or even up towards the ceiling or top hand. And to come out, again, very carefully bend that bottom knee, step back through the trailing leg, and come up. And then it's good to just take a few resting breaths in a couple different ways. I like to sometimes just come into this position here, takes weight completely off the legs and arms, puts weight through into the feet and the hands, and you just rest and breathe. And then ultimately you do come back to some form of mountain pose or Tadasana, and see for yourself how you feel. it's likely the case that there's just a energetic aliveness in the body, and certainly in the legs and the arms, along the spine, but even particularly intriguing is how you feel in your mind. And perhaps it's just kind of a pleasant feeling in working with a posture in this way, safely, yet experiencing, I should say, the posture in its full expression and accruing the benefits of having worked with alignment very carefully, activation very carefully, and awareness. With that, I hope you'll experiment with this wonderful standing and balancing pose at home and experience some of the wonderful benefits at a physical and energetic level that the pose, the asana, provides to us. And see you next time.